And my favorite definition of contemplation comes from a Jesuit theologian named Walter Burkhardt, who says, contemplation is a long, loving look at the real. And I love that short one line, right? Because there's kind of three things embedded in there. The first is that long look. So being able to slow down enough to actually check in and see what's happening and what we're experiencing. But what happens, as we've been talking about, is so often it's uncomfortable and we don't want to take that long look. So the second part is, how do we offer a loving approach to it? And this can be just imagining yourself as a loving parent or guardian or a really good coach, and how would that person, you're a wise adult, approach this experience, this inner experience.
Benjamin, welcome to Chasing Impossible.
Thank you, Oscar. It's great to be with you.
I really enjoyed our initial conversation, so I look forward to this one. So to start us off, question that I ask everybody, what is one thing that felt impossible at one point and now is your new normal?
That's a good question. You're putting me on the spot early here. I'm not sure if it's necessarily felt impossible, but it felt like a challenge, and it felt way off. And that's really been starting my own coaching business. It's been something that really I've felt a calling towards since I was probably 13, 14, like knowing this is my path and this is the thing I'm meant to do on the earth. And so really, I think, grateful to have had that clarity. And then along the way, it's been acquiring the skills, the knowledge, the tools to be able to do that. And then just recently really stepping out and launching that business, being able to coach high performers across different domains, and really live into this work. And it was one of those things, I've been following that calling for a while, really kind of envisioning that type of one-on-one coaching, but also gathering groups and communities and thinking, this is the thing I really want to do. But you never know if it's actually going to be as satisfying as you think it's going to be, right? And once I've been able to launch that, be in my own space, doing the things that really connect and make me feel fully alive, it has been absolutely fantastic and even more rewarding and fulfilling and connecting, to be able to see other people thrive from the work that we do together. So that's one thing that maybe didn't feel impossible, but I'm kind of looking around and we're doing this. This is awesome. So thanks for that question. Yeah.
How did you know it like that early on? Or what were some of the things that you already knew at that early age?
Well, the work that I do with folks is really a stitching together of multiple themes in my life. So there's the athletic theme and being a young athlete and just loving the feel of being fully in my body and performing with teammates and being a part of a team community, being able to work hard and learn what happens when I practice deliberately and kind of grow skills over time. But there's always been a deep spiritual theme of really a curiosity of what does it mean to lead well? What does it mean to be one's full self? What does it mean to be in the present moment? And who are we meant to be connected to each
Those
other?
Are some big questions.
To the bigger world. Yeah. So, those were questions I was asking at a pretty young age. So I think those were the things that I was interested in. And then how do I serve other people? How do I help other people? And I think that part's changed a little bit from when I was younger. I think it was more, wow, I have all these things I want to teach and share and the answers. And that's shifted more towards everyone else has the answers that they need inside of them, but sometimes they need someone to help draw that out. So that's how I see my role in coaching, is that everyone I work with already has the joy, confidence, clarity that they need. But sometimes they need a mirror to reflect that back to them. So that's my role.
What do you think contributes towards us forgetting those things inside of us that are like joy, happiness, purpose, meaning? Like, what does contribute towards us not seeing it or being blind to it? Sometimes not even trusting us to actually look at it because we might already know that it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful question. Um, I there's different models and ways of kind of making sense of that question, but the one that's really resonated for me comes from a Quaker teacher named Parker Palmer, and he talks about living the divided life between who we are on the inside and who we are on the outside are two different things, and we show up and present ourselves in order to fit in to to kind of show our skills, to belong, to achieve, and we present one way to the world that's really different than the inner knowing, the inner joy, the inner purpose that we might know deep down, or we've maybe perhaps even been so disconnected from it we don't know that it's there. In terms of how that happens, I really think it starts young and in early moments where, with family or with community on the playground, we show up as our joyful, free self, and somebody says, "No, you can't be like that," and we go, "Oh, okay, this isn't safe," and so we start to armor up and protect ourselves. And even those early young moments on the playground, for instance, can shape how many of the folks I work with now as high achievers, high performers, live their whole lives, just constantly looking to be at the top and be at the best to prove their sense of self worth for other people. And so they may not know that consciously, but that's kind of the unconscious narrative that they're living. And so that creates, going back to the concept of the divided life, that division creates so much friction and tension and anxiety and exhaustion. And so I think the work is really to begin to slow down and recognize that division, and then see what might need to be healed or reconciled, and how can I move forward in the integrated life where who I am on the inside and who I am on the outside are kind of one continuous movement, one continuous conversation. So um, yeah, that's how I think of where that begins to shape.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. That I like. It's not that I like it, but in general, it's an interesting concept about at some point we learned that it's not safe to be yourself, your true self,
Yeah.
to express yourself, to embrace yourself, follow your interest, your curiosity, all those things. It's kind of like through those experiences, conditioning or expectations, society, all those things. You learn that you need to be a certain way and that being yourself, it's just like I know that experience. I feel like most people have experienced it like, oh, it doesn't feel safe for me to be like this way. Or oh, I need to kind of dim my light a bit so that I'm not like I fit in or I belong or I kind of follow these guidelines of like who am I supposed to be. And with I'm thinking kind of I'm trying to formulate a question there of what is it, where does one start? Well, first of all, how can you identify that you are in a place where you don't feel safe with yourself?
I think it shows up as kind of that sense of um, I feel numb to life. I feel uh, anxious on a daily basis. I feel just like off or stuck. I wake up just tired and exhausted. I think those are all indicators often of some inner discontent or unrest or unsettledness. Um, so those are the ways that I think it starts to show up. I or really the language I use is like, do you feel fully alive? And fully alive for me means like being able to feel sadness and grief, being able to feel grief or being able to feel joy and excitement and gratitude and everything in between. anger, rage, frustration, but being able to fully feel it and then safely and healthily express it, and then continue to be in the present moment with each of those experiences. But when we feel just kind of tight and stuck and tense and just really getting through the day and not being present to it, I think those are indicators of when we're not fully trusting or uh, that deeper sense of ourselves.
Yeah, like that not trusting is one that came up for me as I was thinking like, okay, if I don't trust, if I don't feel safe to be myself, what happens? And I think a lot
Yeah.
of it is also in certain situations you start to kind of filter yourself where you have this initial response that you want to respond, initial thing that you want to share, and then it's like,
Hmm.
no, and you say what is kind of the not necessarily the appropriate, but kind of the right thing or the, kind of the accepted thing, and it's a kind of the visual that came to me is that you have this pretty much filter that you go through where instead of just sharing from who you are, it's kind of like it needs to go through a filter of who you have to be, who you're supposed to be, who you should be, what is allowed, what is not allowed. And through that, you start to literally filter yourself. And it can go so far that at one point you don't really know who you are anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a difficult way to live. And uh, really, really disconnected from a sense of purpose and meaning. Just kind of performing for what everyone else wants you to be. That's uh, yeah, it's really hard.
I literally had this like video that I was working on performing life versus living life,
Hmm.
where it kind of feels like we and I feel like self-development space is helpful if we don't go too extreme with it in some ways, or we don't make it mean something about ourselves, our worth, and our value. Because
Hmm.
you can get to the point where you literally over optimize your whole life to the moment where you're not really living anymore. It's kind of like you're performing life, or you're so
Yeah.
busy with building life that you're not actually being in here and now, actually living it. And
Hmm.
and at the same time, it's kind of like it's not necessarily that you now have to go the other like kind of extreme where like, oh, I don't care, I don't want to work on myself, whatever, I'm just gonna be free and live my life. It's kind of like finding that balance. Also, it's gonna change from season to season, depending kind of what season you're in life. I just find it like very interesting concept of like performing life like versus living life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the two extremes you are naming in some ways are both very disconnected from that truest sense of self. I don't think when people are living in alignment with who they are, they sit on the couch and just watch TV all day. I think they're out in the world creating, connecting, building, really savoring each moment. So I don't think that to be connected to our true self um, or just show up as ourselves equals laziness. But I also don't think it's the other side, as you named, of the self optimization culture, which self help and now some of the performance science tools really kind of hype up of like, are you sleeping enough, and are you doing your breath work and hitting the sauna in the cold tub and all of that, which becomes a huge to do list
Yep.
in someone's day of being the perfect optimized human, right? And for the question that always comes up for me, and I can certainly fall into that trap too. And
Oh yeah.
there's some great wisdom and tools there. But the question for me always comes back to, for what end? Like why? And um, and that's where it starts to sink into these deeper spiritual questions of who are you and what are you meant to do on this earth? And I don't think it's just to be the optimized superhuman. Um,
Yeah. The other one that is helpful with this one is because a lot of times what we do with these achievements and goals, aspirations, all those things, I think what helps is to think about or ask yourself question, what feeling am I chasing? How
yeah.
is it that I want to feel at the end of it? Because a lot of times, a lot of achievement, one, it can come from a place of the feeling you don't like or you want to escape. So you can think of what am I trying to
Hmm.
escape or what am I not. And I had in the last episode, I was talking to my best friend about sitting with the discomfort instead of fixing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that alone, it's not easy. It doesn't feel good in the moment, but it can do so much where now instead of chasing and fixing and like kind of like, oh, I have to fix this problem. No, like you actually need to sit with yourself for like 5 minutes and be
Yeah.
present with
Yeah.
yourself. And and also the more regulated you become, the better you can show up, because you don't have to, it's kind of like you don't have to go through this internal fight of like push and pull with yourself, of forcing
Exactly.
yourself to do it. Then by the time you're just about to start the task, you're now exhausted from that fight with yourself.
Hmm.
And it is like interesting question about like, what is the feeling that I'm chasing? How do I want to feel at the end of it? And
Hmm.
you might find the answer there where you might even be able to feel it. Like it's not that thing will make you feel certain way. But it is interesting that's a lot of times what we do is we're literally just chasing the feeling that we think we want,
Hmm.
or that we think we will get once we get that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great point. And I loved what you said about sitting with discomfort, because often we're like so avoidant of the things that feel uncomfortable or scary or provoke anger or whatever that might be. And actually, when we sit with it and let it move through us, it passes so much more quickly. And the other great part of this is that all of those so-called like negative emotions, that's a real misnomer, because they're there for a reason, and they're showing us something valuable and important that we need to attend to. So the more we can develop a relationship with all of those feelings, the more insight and wisdom we have for how we can move forward, in most connected to ourselves. I mean, anger is such a great example of like something that reveals to us the things that most matter, right? We get most upset and angry and enraged when we see someone harming something that is really valuable to us, or threatening our sense of self and well being. And so, each of those experiences, sadness to such a great teacher of what are the things that matter to us. But we have to be able to really lean into and feel those things too.
Yeah, it's it kind of feels like it's interesting what you mentioned with anger, because for me, growing up, anger would be the forbidden emotion, because
Yeah.
I was the peacemaker, the one
Hmm.
that was always kind of in between the conflict and all those things. And I had to be like the strong one. I couldn't have the problems and all those things, um where for me it's been interesting to explore anger as an emotion, because for the longest
Hmm.
time it was like, I even remember I was very, very young. I think I was 12 or 13. I remember this moment when my parents were like lecturing me on something. And there was this one moment when I was like, I felt this anger that I wanted to express. And then I was like, no. And I was like, I go to sadness. And literally
Yeah.
in that moment, I caught myself, oh, anger, no, no, no. I need to kind of push it down. And sadness came out. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, that was the first time that I experienced and was aware of suppressing anger in that moment,
Hmm.
where it's like, oh, that's the forbidden emotion. And I feel like a lot of us, we have these emotions that we feel like, oh, I can't, um, even with expressing it. I had this like interesting conversation yesterday where I was a guest on the podcast about like kind of being an athlete and dealing with emotions, where
Hmm.
you can't now like just feel all the emotions and express them as you're like in the middle of having to perform. And a lot of times, even if you express them, now you're putting in like in a situation where the opponent can think they have advantage over you. But at the same time, it's like suppressing it is not necessarily the best approach. And there, I had this like interesting discussion with I think it was like one of my friends about, can you feel emotions without expressing them? And that person was like, oh no, like you can't. But then I had a conversation with somebody else, and they're like, yeah, like you don't have to express them to feel them. Like you can still
Hmm.
feel the emotion. And I think that's where sometimes it might even be hard to communicate your emotions, even if you're very aware, Because for me, it's like, I know what I'm feeling, I know how it feels, but sometimes to put it in words, I'm like, let me think on that. How do I describe it? But I'm very aware of like the way I feel, something kind of shifts, something changed, there's like a trigger, and I'm aware of like what kind of trigger it is a lot of times.
Yeah.
But to now put it in words, it's not always, or even like to express it, like I feel it and I'm kind of with it and I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. But I might not necessarily express it the way that it might be, I don't know, like perceived that we express emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I work with this in my coaching practice, right? Like if I'm sitting across from someone and they're having sharing something and it triggers an experience in me, that's not the context to be like, oh wow,
Yep.
that makes me sad.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is like it depends
Yeah.
on the context and how that coaching relationship looks and kind of what space we're in. But that time is really to be that mirror, right? And so for me, it's kind of noting that within myself and acknowledging it, putting and just recognizing what I'm experiencing, and then almost as if I'm talking to that part of myself, just saying, "Hey, can you step back for a second so I can be really present with this person, and I'll go back and attend to you later." And then afterwards, after a session, or if I'm doing public speaking or something like that, it's going back to those experiences that I asked to step back and really being able to feel into them and recognize why they're there, what they were concerned about, and what wisdom they have to show me. But you're right, in certain performance settings, it's really hard to like just slip into that full emotional experience right then. But if we don't go back and attend to those experiences, then they just build up too. So I think there's dexterity there. I was just talking to a nurse actually in an ICU nurse who like has an incredibly stressful job, but also sees death and suffering on a daily basis. And we were workshopping um, how do you cope with those big emotions in a way that also allows you to be attentive to a patient, and what are the procedures and processes so that you don't just clock out, go home, and just act like nothing happened. So I think it differs in context, but it's a question that we all need to wrestle with and explore in our own way.
So what were like some of the techniques or approaches that you discussed with her?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of my favorite tools. I should define this first, though. I think
Yeah, go ahead.
uh, my my background is both in sport and performance psychology, but also studying formally uh, spiritual and religious traditions. And in our spiritual traditions, we have this kind of strain in each tradition. It takes a different form of contemplative practices. And my favorite definition of contemplation comes from a Jesuit theologian named Walter Burkhardt, who says contemplation is a long, loving look at the real. And I love that short one line, right? Because there's kind of three things embedded in there. The first is that long look, so being able to slow down enough to actually check in and see what's happening and what we're experiencing. Um, but what happens, as we've been talking about, is so often it's uncomfortable, and we don't want to take that long look. So the second part is, how do we offer a loving approach to it? And this can be just imagining yourself as a loving parent or guardian or a really good coach, and how would that person, you're a, a wise adult, approach this experience, this inner experience. And then the last part is the real, because when we're able to take this long, loving look, uh, the the different biases and lenses that we view the world begin to kind of take a back seat, and we can look a little bit more clear with a little bit more clarity on what are the next right steps, and what insight is emerging here that I can use. And so reality becomes perhaps just a little bit more clear. So that's how I understand contemplative practices. And there's all kinds of ways we can do that. We can do that through movement. We can do that through journaling. We can do that in community. We can do that in meditation. All kinds of different forms of it. Um, but the one we were discussing with this nurse that I think is powerful, and one that I use pretty much on a daily basis, is to imagine our experience, this body as a guest house. And there's a poem by Rumi that this practice is kind of based off of, and he says, like, this being human is a guest house, every day a new arrival. And so sadness, anger, grief, joy, all of these things come and go in our experiences. And many times we want to just slam the door on the experiences we don't want to have, or shoo them out and get rid of them, right? And so the guest house is a practice of how do we welcome them, welcome all of them, like a benevolent host. And so for me, it looks like a meditation practice of 10 or 15 minutes of sitting in quiet in a place that's comfortable. And then just checking in on what are the body sensations and emotional experiences that I'm having right now. And can I start to befriend them? One way that this can be facilitated too is if you imagine each experience like a creature or an object, and use your imagination, kind of get some distance who you
Mm-hmm.
are and what that experience really is. So for me, anger is just like a little ball of flames, kind of like the
Nice.
character Inside Out, right? So that creates a little bit of distance, and then we can have a conversation like, "Why are you here? What are you trying to teach me? What are your deepest fears, longings, or the gifts that you're trying to help me express?" And so that practice of beginning to create some quiet and stillness for that long look, and then being able to offer a compassionate curiosity to those experiences is a huge facilitator of clarity, but also calm and confidence,
Yeah.
um, and courage. So I think it's both a way of checking in with ourselves, but it's also been a huge performance enhancing tool as well. I was working with a professional soccer player, and we were doing this practice, and it was really amazing just to watch his physical body change as we went through this practice. And he went from this tension and anxiety of, wow, I've been performing under so much pressure, and like as soon as I make a mistake, the coach starts yelling at me, and I just spiral, to reconnecting to what it feels like to play with joy and what it felt like to play as a child, and seeing that relationship to the anxiety shift a little bit, and his body just open up and start to breathe more deeply, and the smile come on his face, and that's where we're at our best. So um, that's a long answer to your question on how to do this practically, but it's a long loving look at the real.
I like that. It's very interesting, the connection between cognitive and the body, the mind and the body.
Mhm.
Even like, um, wait, there's one thing that I want to touch on. Um, I like what you said about that. Um, it's kind of like this combination of create distance, and with distance you detach, and once you are detached, now you can actually see. Like you see
Yeah.
what you're actually looking at. What's the situation, and what's kind of what's in front of me, what am I feeling? And but kind of like, what am I feel not even what am I feeling, but like usually I say, and it's we discussed it before about the internal family systems, where like there's parts of me. So it's
Mhm.
very different, kind of the way you approach it. It feels very different when you say I'm angry versus part of me feels angry. Because then
Yeah,
when once
absolutely.
you have this part of me feels angry, now you're like, okay, this part, I can now take it, I can look at it, I can observe it, I can try to understand it, be curious, compassionate, and you can actually
Mhm.
do something. But if it's me, I am angry, then now you internalize it and you identify with it, where it's much harder to look at it because you don't have that distance and you're very
Yeah.
kind of attached to the whole experience. And you might, in both cases, still be living it. But in one case, you have that distance where you can look at it and observe it as well. versus in the other one, you're just fully immersed in it. Is there a way how to not necessarily snap out of it, but if somebody can identify that, yeah, I'm the second one where I'm deeply into the emotion as it's happening, then a lot of times I look back with regret of things that I said, things that I've done, and all those things. Even dealing with that alone, like
For sure.
that's practice as well. Sometimes you need
Yeah.
to go and like clean up the mess that you made. Um, how to maybe approach it, how to build more towards having that detachment where initially it might not be right in the moment, but with time you might be able to even identify, oh, there's a space, and then I still respond. And then there's like, oh, there's a space I can actually pause and respond. And then with time you start to slowly practice and you control your response.
Mhm.
Where to start, how to approach it.
It's a great question. I think it it can differ for each of us in how we find our way back to that truer sense of self. I think this is a space where sometimes a breathing practice or really actually like feeling your feet physically on the ground, reconnecting to your body and a sense of agency in your body can help us find that observer self and create a little bit of the distance. But I think the other thing that's coming up as you're sharing this is how countercultural this is too, right? To our kind of self-improvement culture, which is actually that you already have an awareness within you that's calm and confident and courageous and clear and compassionate. And so these experiences that kind of take over and can hijack us are not our deepest essence. And it's not that we have to go and try to fix them. It's really that we can rest back into the awareness that's always there. That's like the depth of the ocean that's not, you know, swirling with the currents as much as there's a
Yeah.
stillness. And so that's already there. That's already available to you. And that's a very different way of approaching life and our inner experiences than, wow, I'm constantly behind and man, I don't like this part of me and I got to fix that. Um, it's already there and it's always been with you. And so now, how do you befriend the experiences that feel really intense? And uh, that true self and true self to part um, relationship is it takes kind of a different approach when we can trust that it's already there.
Yeah, it is interesting. I also had this thought recently about not everything that you become aware of that you don't like, you want to address, you want to work on needs to be fixed right now. It's kind of like
Yeah.
this assumption that awareness has like deadline, that now that you're aware of it, I have to go and fix it. Where especially there's this one moment in self work where you reach kind of what I call like you become hyper aware. Now you see everything that's wrong with you
Hmm.
and you have no idea what to do with it, and you don't even know where to start. You just see that like I'm a mess, like I have all these things, like everything is wrong with me, I don't know where to start, and you feel overwhelmed and you feel like now I have to fix everything, like my life is a mess, I'm a mess, and all those things where that moment can be tough to go through, especially if you kind of go through it by yourself and you don't really have support system that can guide you or
Yeah.
support you, because it can feel very overwhelming and you can get very, very hard on yourself. Um, Especially if it's one of the patterns then that you become aware of, and and then you beat yourself up about beating yourself up.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
But it is something that I find like very interesting, that like becoming aware of like just getting that hyper awareness, it doesn't mean that if you're aware of something, it has to be fixed now. Sometimes you just
Yeah.
need to sit with it. And even that sitting with it, it might take a couple of years before you're ready to actually address it and work through it. And that's okay. It doesn't make you, and I think with that fixing, like one underlying thing a lot of times is that like, I'm not enough. I need to fix myself so that I can this, that, the other. And it's like, what if this is your opportunity to actually accept yourself where you're
Yes.
not perfect and you have flaws, and sit with
Hmm.
it and give yourself some compassion, and that alone can do so much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really fascinating. You name it like that, Oscar, because I've seen this with clients where they come in really feeling stuck and not sure why, and after a couple conversations, it's all of a sudden that like boom insight and clarity, and you can see their eyes just like get big of like, oh my gosh, now I understand these patterns and how they're working in me. And then it's like, well, how do I fix this? And how do I get out of this? And that, and I'm so guilty of this too. This is
And also,
an
how do I
experience
fix it fast?
yes, yeah, because I don't want it. I don't like it, and I don't want to be that way.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
what's funny though is actually, as we were talking about parts, that's another part of ourselves. That's not the truest essence. That's not the
Mm,
the the wise seer. That's a part that's like, wow, I've got to be perfect, and I need to again perform in a different way, right? Like I need to be the one who's emotionally attuned and self aware, um, and so I need to fix that part of myself now. And so the practice once again is just being compassionate with that urge and that insight, and then to trust like, hey, it's okay. Like you're already worthy of love and belonging, and you don't have to go make those fixes. And that part of it, that movement is difficult because it's really countercultural, and it requires a
yeah.
lot of compassion and love and trust, uh, and and being able to set that fixing impulse to the side, or really just befriend it. Um, yeah, because
Yeah. And
and we should mention too that all of these parts of ourselves formed for a good reason, to keep us safe at some point in our life, and so that desire to be perfect, that desire to achieve and to be polished, at some point was really serving us, and so being offering some kindness for that experience, and recognizing there's a point at which it can become a barrier for our fullest self expression too. So it's a both and.
yeah, it works up to a point. It's kind of like achieving from a place of shame and not enoughness. It works, but it's not
Yes.
sustainable. It will get you to a certain point,
Yeah.
but it won't get you further than that point.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's a great motivator, and like how many how many successful athletes have we seen just use that as the fuel, but then get to the end of their career, or face a big injury, or win the championship and realize this is hollow, and I'm still feeling really disconnected to myself. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add when it comes to fixing yourself, I think, um, which in itself, it's like, oh, something is wrong with me, I'm broken. It's like, is that the right mindset from which we want to start? But even with that, like with working on yourself, improving yourself, I think a lot of times it's also like what space is it coming from? Like what energy is it coming from? Is it coming from self hate or self love?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
there's like you can do things because you hate yourself or you don't like yourself. You don't like the way you are. You're probably gonna get some progress, but like along the way, like first of all, it probably won't be as good or as quick, but you won't enjoy the whole thing. It will feel like this chore that you have to do because like, well, I'm not enough, so now I have to do it. Versus doing
Hmm.
it from the place of self love and wanting to show yourself love um and through that building stronger relationship with yourself as well. Whereas in the other
Yeah.
way, like it doesn't really build that strong relationship or like not necessarily a relationship you would want to build with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then it shapes our relationships with other people too. How we
Yeah.
approach
Oh
our inner
yeah.
experiences, and the things that we despise about ourselves, and beginning to befriend and appreciate those radically changes how we show up with other people too. So the if we can practice that nonviolence within, it shows up as nonviolence
Non-violence within. I love that.
externally too. Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's a
I
really
want to.
interesting experience I've been having lately. So this is a little bit of a story, but I've been interested in trying out martial art,
Oh,
um,
nice.
and and so I found this. email address hidden deep in Google on a random web page of this gathering of people at a local park who do push hands Tai Chi. And push hands Tai Chi is like a partnered activity where you're trying to knock the other person off balance. And it's a very subtle art. And so I showed up as a complete beginner, complete novice to this park. And everyone's like, you've never done any martial arts. You've never, do you even know what you're doing here? And I was like, no. And I love that. And like, I'm just here to learn and experience this. And so one guy pulled me aside and he's like, okay, I'm going to stand here. You just try to like knock me off balance or push me over. So I come in like with some force and energy, and all of a sudden I'm just like falling through space. Like there's just nothing there. Like every time I go to touch him, I'm just missing, and he just is just moving so fluidly, looks like Gumby, um, and and I'm like, what is happening here? And then we switch roles, and he stands there, or I stand there, and he comes to try to knock me over, and he takes like one or two steps forward and puts his hand on my chest, and I'm like falling back 5 feet, and I don't know what's happening. And so it feels like magic at first when you're like a complete novice, and then the whole time I'm just grinning and laughing, like this is insane. Um, but the whole art is really working with the other person's energy and what they come with. You use kind of in relationship to them, and so it is a practice of nonviolence. Of you stand firm in the ground that you're standing on, so you're not pushed around uh, or knocked off balance yourself, but you're also not aggressive in attacking the other person. And so when they overexert themselves or come into your space, you just gently use that energy uh, with them. And so somebody who comes hard and forcefully into you, you just kind of move to the side and brush that off, and then they go flying flying by. And so it's been interesting though for me in my coaching work and in my own personal inner work, how much that practice has been a really embodied example of the things I'm working out emotionally too. Because there's this feeling you get, and it's almost like your feet are like 3 feet in concrete underground, like really anchored. And that feels that for me is this experience of like grounding or
Yeah.
really being my truest self. And whatever comes at me, I can just move with a really fluid and flexible relationship to it. And there's nothing that I really can't work with. Um, but there's another experience, which is where I started in the push hands Tai Chi, which is I didn't know exactly how to work with another person in this martial art, and so my two approaches were brace and lean forward and try to combat their energy with more of my energy. But then that leaves me susceptible to just being kind of gently tugged forward and falling like flat on my face, right? And the other is just to kind of stand there and take it. And if somebody comes up and just kind of pushes on you, you just your body and your posture, there's a breaking point, and you just kind of crumple because you can't you're not fluid and flexible. You're still really rigid. Um, and so both of those were really emblematic of some emotional approaches that I could take too, of like leaning in with more like the other person's wrong, and here's how I can correct it or resist it, or somebody coming right at me and just saying you're wrong, and you should be fill in the blank way. But there's this third way of being anchored and rooted in knowing who you are, but also being flexible and in relationship with another person. So it's been a really beautiful embodied experience of that kind of emotional and spiritual internal experience, and has radically shaped my coaching work with clients in the way that I can find that that sense of being rooted in myself. So um, yeah, I think that's a great kind of capture of some of the themes that we've been talking about.
It is interesting how I kind of I'm very similar in that I use different life experiences or challenges or things like that as a way to study myself, learn about myself, explore myself, and kind of look for parallels with different concepts that others can kind of relate to. Even like doing the winter swims. A lot of times people think I'm doing it for the health benefits, which like there are health benefits. For me, it's mental game.
Oh
It's
yeah.
full on just like mental game. Same with like endurance races that I would do. Like a lot of it is mental game. Um, because for me, marathon was my impossible, and now I have done it, and it's kind of like, huh, like it's very interesting to be, because by the time I got to doing it, it didn't feel
Hmm.
like it's impossible. But there was a time that I didn't even consider doing like half marathon because I had this thought of like, oh, I can't run, I can't do long distances. And I
Yeah.
had no like real reason to think that. It's just that at one point I kind of learned it, and I was like, yeah, like I'm not a runner. And even now, like I don't necessarily think that I'm a runner, but it's like, does it matter? Because I have finished like the races where it's like, it doesn't even like matter if I identify as that or not, because I have results. And if I forget, I have all these medals to
Yeah.
remind me about it.
Yeah.
Um, and and it's very interesting, kind of what you talked about. That I wrote down like force versus flow,
Hmm.
and finding the balance between the two, or even initially distinguishing like which one is which, because there's this level of surrender that you need to go through where there are things you can control, which like for the most part that's really like you. um, you can influence others, but really control you can only control
Hmm.
yourself. And a lot of times we don't necessarily like, or we would want to have more control, we want to have more kind of ability to predict things or create certainty and all those things. And I feel like through that we now start to force things. And it might even be like within self development. I want to heal faster. I want to get better faster. I want to get out of where I am right now, like much faster. Where through that force, well, one thing is you're probably going to crash and burn some point. But also you don't, like, even with that, like, good example with that sitting with it instead of fixing it. We
Yeah.
were talking in the last episode with Cindy about it, how now you will see the achievers. They're like, okay, every day I need to 5 minutes sit with it, and it's like, that's not really it. Like, you
Uh-huh.
you
Uh-huh.
need to sit with it when you need to sit with it. It's not something that you're like, okay, now like for me to speed up this whole thing, I have to sit
Yeah.
with it every single day for like 5 minutes. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, because like you can't schedule when it's gonna come up. And a lot of times you learn in that moment, in that experience. And and then there's like these moments where you have these like tests, where like for me some of the races they have been where, in half Ironman race, like I had very very bad lower back pain after bike ride, and I literally, like, it took me 11 minutes to change my shoes and shirt. I was not,
Hmm.
I was like, I was moving like this, changing my
Yeah.
shirt. I could
Yeah.
not move. And I have half marathon ahead of me after this. And as I was reflecting on it in the episode that we did, I remember thinking, at no moment did the thought of quitting cross my mind. And
Hmm.
there was a time that it would be like, I'm done. I'm in pain. Like this, like, what am I doing here? Kind of thing. It didn't even cross my mind. So even with that, there's those moments when that's that practice that you take with like sitting with it, feeling, and whatever you kind of applying in the moment, things that you learn from self development. There will be moments when you get kind of tested, and that's where you get that measure of growth that you have had, because you can read 10 pages every day, which like nothing bad about it. But if you're not able to apply the concept that you're learning in real life when it matters or when you need it,
Yeah.
then you might as well go and watch a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great, totally great point. Um, yeah. I mean, these things take practice and they take time. And then there's these moments where you realize like, oh, all of that work that I've been doing that I thought wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I
Because
love those.
especially for the achievers among us and myself
Yep.
included, it's like, why? Like I'm sitting with this thing day after day, and it's like not going away. It's just still here, and it's like, yeah, that's part of the process
Yeah,
is
that's
like
the
befriending it. time,
That's
right?
the point.
and then and then there's a point at which it's like, oh, I know this experience and I know how to work with it. And now, I'm in a moment of pressure or of expectation or performance, and I really have some flexibility and a great relationship with this part of myself, and I know how to work with it. And then there's that relief and that confidence of like, hey, that did work, that did pay off. And sometimes that insight happens immediately in a meditation or in a coaching session. I think in when I'm working with my own coach or when I'm coaching others, I think that relationship with another person can be really helpful in facilitating some of those breakthroughs. Um, but but it is that long arc that we really start to see the growth. And and I think points to this other concept that you were kind of touching on with the marathon running and the swimming in the cold, which is self-efficacy and being able to see ourselves um, succeed. And self-efficacy, really close cousin to confidence, but basically the ability or our trust in our ability to do the task at hand. And it can come from what we say to ourselves. It can come from people cheering us on. It can come from how we attribute our physiological state. But the biggest predictor of our self confidence or self efficacy is past success. And so, the more we do those difficult things, the more we build that confidence. And it can happen incrementally. It can be like doing one cold plunge and then recognizing like, oh, I can sit in that discomfort, and I can trust
Actually, I
my
have an
ability to sit
example
in.
with this. I have an example
Yeah.
with this, even with the swims, because I did 1 year. I did 90 days every single day, regardless of like how cold it got. I did every single day, and I remember the first like 10 to 14 days as I'm approaching the river, I have this question in my mind. I wonder if I'm gonna get in or not today. And
Hmm.
then after that while, it shifted into the question, I wonder how long I'm going to stay in today. So it wasn't a question whether I'm going to get in or not, because I had enough proof
Yeah.
of like, I don't want to, like, some days I do not want to get in, most days. Um, and, and I would still get in. And through having those experiences, that question shifted away from I wonder if to I wonder how long, where I didn't
Hmm.
question my ability to get in, or I was trusting myself that like, yeah, I'm gonna get in and I'm gonna do it this way.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's really fascinating to watch those things compound. One practice sometimes I do with clients, and I do in my coaching course with folks from all kinds of different backgrounds, is just write a list of all the difficult things that you've done in your life, small things, big things, things you do on a daily basis that are slightly uncomfortable, and how you lean into those things. And if we can build a library of those experiences of difficult things, now when you're faced with the next thing where you're like, man, I don't know if I can do this or not, you have that mental library of past success and past moments of going for it, so that you can say, hey, I am someone who does difficult things, and really claim that identity, and then lean into what's right in front of you. And the best part of that is then you get to add the next thing onto that list, and it just keeps growing.
Yeah, you create that momentum. And there was this interesting thought that I had where a couple of years ago I had a call with somebody, and she was telling me like, have you thought about building like a program or something on how to be able to adapt and kind of be quite flexible in the moment? Because even like when I moved here, I would have people call me like 1 month later. They're like, "How are you like settling in?" And I'm like, "I was fine the first day. Like I was fine." And then I kind of,
Mhm.
when she said it, I was kind of thinking on it. Okay, what contributes towards your ability to one is take some risks or get out of your comfort zone, do some things you haven't really done before. Kind of it on all goes under this like umbrella of stepping into uncertainty, being uncertain,
Yeah.
not be able to predict things. And as I was reflecting on it, I was thinking that a lot of it comes back to your you're trusting yourself to be able to deal with whatever will be the outcome. Because a lot of
Hmm.
times we don't take the action because we're afraid of what if the bad thing happens. But then if you have had enough of those experiences where the bad thing happens and you survive it, which I don't think you can necessarily kind of prime yourself in it. I feel like you need to go through them where you prove that to yourself, where like, I feel like the world is ending and it's like, oh, I survived that. Oh my gosh, this thing happened. Oh, I survived that. Where now as you step into the next thing, every time the next thing comes, you doubt less and less your ability to deal with whatever is the outcome, because you have dealt with all kinds of outcomes in the
Hmm.
past, where now as the next thing happens, it, it might still be there, but it doesn't necessarily get in your way of actually taking the action and doing the thing.
Yeah. 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 I think the word that you said that I really was thinking about was uncertainty. Um, and how what our reactions are to uncertainty, because in some ways uncertainty is like such a catalyst for creativity and innovation and imagination, and change and growth. But for many of us, depending on the context, like uncertainty is also a great trigger of our sympathetic nervous system in our fight or flight mode, where we just go into tunnel vision and self protect. Um, and and I think one of the things that we've been circling around in this conversation, but really helps with uncertainty, and then helps with uh, those, um, being adaptable and taking risks, is trusting ourselves and trusting our ability in the present moment and to be fully present. Because when we look ahead, we can envision the best possible outcomes, and we can also envision the worst possible outcomes, and neither of them are truly real, until we live into that moment. But I think a lot of our challenges with uncertainty, and especially in the future, is looking into the future and not being able to have that self trust that I'll be able to make the appropriate choice, do the right action in that moment. So it really comes back to, can I train my ability to be fully present and trust myself in this moment? And over time, then we stack those moments together.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I want to add here is that, because it's kind of like, okay, it makes sense. I need to trust myself. But what if you don't trust yourself? What if you doubt yourself? And it's something that I have been kind of pondering a lot on and thinking about, because it is that message of like, believe it before you see it, and all that. But what if somebody comes from a background where they have no reason to believe anything, and they're so deeply conditioned into kind of the worst thing happening, or maybe even like being in the victim mindset, where
Yeah.
all they have is doubt, worry, disbelief, and even to that, like, did I believe I will finish half Iron, because I trained for it only 90 days. And at the
Hmm.
beginning of those 90 days, I just barely finished half marathon, which is what you finish with. Did I, was I sure I'm gonna finish it? Like, no, like I did the whole time. I was like, and my brother, he was telling me like, you look like weirdly calm that morning. I think they were more concerned or like anxious than I was. And I was like, yeah, because at this point I can't really like, there's nothing I can do, and I will find out. And it's also not attaching that meaning to it. I didn't make it mean anything about me. It was
Yeah.
kind of, I will find out if within these 90 days I was able to get myself to the point where I finish or not. And
Yep.
and I think big layer that um, gets in the way a lot of times is shame, because you add shame to the whole equation of, oh, what if this happens and then now I feel this way, or now if it's not even the failure. I was thinking about failure as well, that
Hmm.
it's not that you fail. I think a lot of times that bothers us is it's others seeing us, perceiving us as failure, or witnessing us failing, that we're actually afraid of. We're not necessarily afraid of the failure itself, because if you failed in isolation, you don't really care. Like, you just go and try again. But if others see and others judge, now we're bothered.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for some people, I think too, failure is so deeply conditioned as
Yep.
the negative impulse from somebody else that then we have that voice in ourselves too. So even if we do fail in isolation, it is still self-critical because we've so internalized that voice. But yeah, that's such a good point on shame and failure, because thinking about your example of the half Ironman, if you if you take yourself out of the equation and you train for 90 days and see what you're capable of,
And I was
then
also
it's
documenting the whole thing, like sharing it online without knowing if I can finish it or not, which for me was like interesting challenge to go through personally because I was
yeah.
like, if I don't do it now, people are gonna see.
Yeah, yeah, I know that makes sense. And I can see kind of a couple ways of even internalizing it and understanding that experience, right? There's one where it's like, I'm gonna give myself 90 days, I'm gonna record it, and we're gonna see like, can I complete this half Ironman? And then it's a fun experiment and it's just a challenge. And I'm gonna put my best effort into it and we're gonna document it, and then we're gonna realize like, hey, I could do it or I can't. And if I'm going to do it next time, I'm going to change it up and do it this way. But that's a very different mindset than I'm recording this. I better be able to perform and
Yep.
complete it. And if I don't, nobody's going to like me, and everybody's going to be like, why did you do that in the first place? And they're going to all unsubscribe from my channel, and and then the loop continues, right? Um, but those are two totally different ways of approaching the same exact thing, and there's research around this in sports psychology. We call it challenge versus threat thinking, and
Yeah.
or playing to win or playing not to lose, and challenge thinking being this. Let's just lean in and see what's possible, and if we mess up, then that's a great learning experience, and we're gonna file that data away and help us improve and grow into the next category and next challenge. But if it's a threat, then it's like my self-worth is on the line, my identity is on the line, and physiologically that is interpreted in our body as an existential threat. And so we tighten up, and that is to the point of shame, like a huge, like just alarm bells, sirens going off. Don't do it. Because baked into our biology and into our social conditioning is the idea of if we fail, if we mess up, if we embarrass ourselves, we'll be cast out of our community and not have the belonging and safety that we need to survive. And so there's deep down there's a reason for it, and the practice I think that can be helpful is just acknowledging that and recognizing it. Um, I think Brene Brown has this real quick practice of just when you feel shame, just repeating shame like 5 times, like shame, 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 shame. And it's an interesting experience because, like we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, it allows that experience, that shame, just to kind of like flow through you. I notice like my face flushes and I get kind of hot, and my palms clam up. But if I can just notice like, oh, that's shame, and repeat that, I can let it flow through my whole body, and it's not a comfortable feeling at all. But then it passes and I go, okay, like that shame came up because I don't want to embarrass myself, and I don't want to look bad, and I want to fit in, and I want people to like me. And being able to acknowledge that creates that distance we were talking about originally. So um, yeah, such a good point, and I'm so glad that you were able to find that half Ironman as an experiment, and just go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm actually doing it right now as well. I'm not half Ironman, but I'm actually before that. I want to add that
Yeah,
there was this. I think it kind of applies to a lot of things that we discussed. This concept that I kind of came up with or concluded with some introspection a couple of years ago, that kind of what has helped me is initially like being self-judgmental and all those things, being hard on yourself, replacing that with curiosity. Because with
oh yeah,
curiosity, like it's kind of even the way I would describe creating safe space for others. Like if you're now listening to somebody right, wrong, black, white, like you're not necessarily providing a safe space. You're now judging.
Mhm.
But when you approach things with curiosity, it's kind of like you're a blank page and you're like, oh, I'm gathering data, I'm gathering information. A
Yeah.
lot of times, by the time you get to the judgment, there's nothing to judge because you understand. And
Yeah.
that's where I think it's that it's very interesting how things can shift when you literally first identify, like, and that takes some awareness to identify, like, where am I judging myself? And by the way, I am currently reading book Self-Compassion, and one of the exercises there was to write things that you are hard on yourself about or you judge yourself about. And I went to a cafe and I was like, okay, I'm just going to quickly go through these couple of exercises. So that was the first exercise. I started to
Uh-huh.
write. I had like 6 pages. 6 pages. Because like I would identify one thing and I'm like, no, but there's this another thing. And I'm like kind of going through like everything that came to me. I'm just like writing it down and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is taking forever. And through that, I was like, oh, so there still is like a lot of judgment there. And even like from there, it's different place that I'm in where I'm not judging myself for having that. I'm
Mhm.
recognizing the pattern and I'm being curious of like, huh, okay, it's still there. And what can I do
Yeah.
about it? But not from a place where I'm like, I need to fix it now. But it's more
Yes.
from the place
Yes.
of like, okay, like I'm aware of it. And it's like, oh, a lot of things start to make sense. Some patterns start to make sense. And there's this challenge that I started to do. I think it was like a couple of days ago. Um, I call it Chase the Shame, where every day I would identify one, and it doesn't have to be anything big. I would
Mhm.
identify this one thing where I would feel like, oh, like kind of, I get this idea of something that I could do that is a bit like uncomfortable, and I would feel like some shame where I'm like, I don't want to do it,
Yeah.
or there's kind of like this kind of resistance towards it. Like literally yesterday, I started a conversation with one girl in the gym that I have seen her online. And I kind of noticed her in this like co-working space that we both go to, and I was like, "Is that her?" And then I would have a couple of times where I'm like, "Oh, I should have a like I want to start a conversation with her," and then I'm like, "No, no, 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 like you don't do that." And then yesterday I was like, we both were in the changing rooms, and I started a conversation with her, and we had like great chat. Um, we followed each other and like we now like we probably gonna meet each other quite often because we both pretty much live there. Um, but but even like through that, I would identify that like that one moment when it's like, no, okay,
Yeah.
chase it, face it. And the interesting thing about shame, I have had it several times where even like with some people that I would like even growing up, I had this thing where I would write letters to people. And I would kind of, whatever came to me, I would express it. And I have had done something similar in situations where there's either some conflict or disagreement or something like that, where I'm kind of expressing kind of the place that I'm in or kind of my perspective and all that, while also sharing like appreciation, gratitude, and all those things, kind of like whatever comes to me from the heart. And I remember there was this one person who was like, "Oh, I'm literally like crying reading this. Like, it must have been so hard for you to share this." And I'm like, "Not really." And when you think about shame, it feels like you have this huge wall in front of you before you have shared, before you have spoken it, faced it, let it out. It feels like this huge thing you need to overcome. But then once you actually face it and you because shame loves like isolation and like silence and like kind of keeping it to
Mhm.
yourself. But the moment
Mhm.
you actually let it out, it's kind of like it
Yeah.
vanishes. But that
Yeah.
letting out, that barrier towards it, it feels so hard. It feels so big. It feels nearly impossible. Like I just
Yeah.
can't do this. And with time, as you start, and it doesn't have to be anything big, but the more you start to do it, and the more you practice it, the more you embrace it, and you start to see that, oh, like it's just a pattern. It doesn't have to control me, and I can actually take action while feeling this emotion. And soon enough, once I do it, it's kind of like you have these clouds in front of you, and the moment you take that action, they kind of clear out. Like it's very like I find it very fascinating, just experiencing it, but it doesn't get easier every time.
No, it doesn't. But that's such a beautiful practice. I love that. I just wrote that down. Chasing the shame. I've actually done a similar practice where
Yeah.
I haven't used that language, but it's like, yeah, finding one moment a day to be uncomfortable, and
Hmm.
usually shame's the underlying feeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that. That's fantastic. And it's interesting you say you were talking about like once you express it or share it, it often goes away because in most cases the antidote to shame is connection,
Yeah.
because it's a an isolating feeling trying to where we feel like we don't belong or don't connect. And so if we can express it to someone who can understand and can be like, oh, that's okay, or you're good, that changes everything because we remember that we belong and we're connected to other people. And so yeah, but being able to build the confidence to lean into those moments and practice that on a daily basis is such a cool approach.
I
And
actually
while it
don't
doesn't
think
necessarily,
you have confidence. I think it's I don't think for me it's confidence. Like it might be, it depends. Sometimes at certain moments it might be that your pain is bigger than facing it. Um and sometimes it is more of that kind of curiosity. Because I know that for me, if I stay comfortable for too long, I'll become destructive. Like
Mhm.
I usually describe myself as German Shepherd. I need to be doing something. I need to be working on something. and and that's where like I have these different things that I identify, but I think the more I approach it like a game or like a challenge,
Mhm.
where the winning is participating kind of thing,
Yeah.
the less I may be attached to that outcome, because I feel like when we have outcome in focus, there's higher stakes. But and it because I do think having approaching it with from a space of confidence definitely helps. But I rarely think that for me personally it has been like I feel confident to face my shame now.
Oh yes, yeah. I think in I think my use of confidence
Or maybe
there
that like
wasn't quite.
trust yourself, like self
That's
trust. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
more
yeah,
what I'm talking about. Like this deep grounded confidence, not the swagger of like, oh
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I've got this. Because no, to face some of these things is like, yeah, every and to do it on a daily basis or look out for those
yeah.
moments of discomfort. Like there's a reason
Yeah, and then you
they're
start to see
uncomfortable.
more of
Yeah.
them as well. Now you become aware
Yes.
of them,
Yeah.
and it's like there's
Yeah.
so many.
But to even do it in the first place
Oh yeah,
requires, or maybe not, it doesn't require, but it shows the deep self trust that you already have, that you'll be able to take that risk and be able to meet yourself regardless of what happens, and that is a huge skill and practice and a reminder of what we've talked about. That's the capacity and belonging, the trust, the awareness that's already within us. Yeah.
I wanted to touch on in regards to connection on vulnerability.
Yeah.
Um, I had this like video that I was working on where I was kind of thinking about how a lot of times we have, and I do see this a lot with achievers where we work on like achieving, improving, and all those things. A lot of times with this thought of like, oh, like I'll be ready to connect with somebody once I'm at like that level or that space where I'm like super optimized.
Mhm.
Where a lot of it is kind of you chasing that feeling of, oh, I don't have to be vulnerable now. I'm perfect. I don't have to be
Yeah.
vulnerable, kind of thing. But like you can't kind of self-develop your way into connection. um Connection a lot of times, because I was thinking even with that, like what actually contributes towards sense of connect, like not even sense of connection. There's difference between sense of connection and real connection. um
Yeah.
where you can have sense of connection where you both connect over like, oh, I love this like author or this like concept, or like I'm working on these goals or I have these interests. You can connect over that, but it's not like real deep connection. And when I
Mhm.
was kind of reflecting on it, I was like, oh, I think it's vulnerability. I think that's where we really connect. But at the same time, it's something that none of us actually enjoy or love,
Yeah.
to be vulnerable or feel exposed with, showing the real you, the raw you, the not over optimized or perfected you, but who you really are. Um, do you have any advice when it comes to stepping into that? Because what comes on the other side is very beautiful, very powerful, but that journey to get there, it can feel so hard that we literally we avoid being vulnerable. So with that, we can lose that like we can lose that upside of feeling really connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think some of the practices we've already talked around shame and befriending the difficult experiences are great ways to kind of prepare ourselves or kind of reconnect after the fact if we put ourselves out there and we're not met with connection because and that's really the essence of the vulnerability, right? Is we offer an invitation of connection to someone and sometimes people blow us off or they just want something from us and it's
I usually
transactional.
say it's not just invitation. It's kind of like you give them a knife. And it's like
Perhaps.
it's on you what to do, because you can use it against me. You can now in this vulnerable moment hurt me, or you can choose not to do anything with it that could be harming, because in that moment you feel so exposed that based on the response it can make things worse for you, especially when it's something very, very vulnerable that you're sharing. And it
Mhm.
does feel like I'm giving you this power to hurt me if you choose to, when I'm
Yeah.
in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and this is partly why those protective patterns form uh, early, and then why we keep them, and why they're really useful too, because
Yeah.
to continue to put yourself out there vulnerably and share yourself in a space where you're not going to be received, and you're going and people will make fun of you or push you out or where there will be violence or anything like that. Like that's not safe. That's not good. So those protective mechanisms are there for a point. And then there's the threshold at which um, we learn to maybe let those step aside for a second because this person may be safe enough where we can be our full self and to be in relationships and to find people that are safe enough to allow ourselves out and to trust that within ourselves and to be able to be the one to take the first step into that is a like I think one of the most beautiful gifts we can give one another and to for me in my work both one on one but also in groups I absolutely love gathering people and creating the container, the ritual, the habits, the ways of being together that can let some of those protective, judgmental, shaming parts of ourselves step back a little bit, and to ask big questions together and recognize, wow, we're all wrestling with something, and there's no
Yeah.
this being human is a mystery, and we're all at different stages in the journey, and to have that type of space is really comforting and really supportive. At least it is for me and has been for me in the communities that I've been a part of, the good friends that have developed in being able to just simply ask like how are you, but like really ask that, not in the superficial way. Um, and that's often a way to start, like as we're moving through our day and we're encountering strangers, that can be a vulnerable place to
Yeah.
chase the shame. Is can I ask someone how are you, but like with the intensity and the resoluteness of like really wanting to know, and being able to listen to whatever comes back, and what a gift to receive that in the course of
Yeah. Yeah.
the day. Yeah.
Somebody seeing you as a safe space I think it's one of the biggest compliments that you can receive. When somebody feels safe enough to share the real you with them, and you give them that space to be truly themselves, and they are accepted and seen as they are. It's very beautiful. And I wrote down, it came to me that also one thing that happens with vulnerability, which I think a lot of high achievers struggle with, is you give up control when you're vulnerable.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that that's a hard one. But also, I think what helps with, or what has helped me with getting more vulnerable, or maybe embracing it more, is that realization that the more you accept yourself as you are, the, I don't want to say easier, but the better you become at being vulnerable. Because it kind of, it's, I think there's a bit less pressure, or you have more of that ability to meet yourself on the other side of whatever will be the response, similar to that, like adapting to things. When you accept yourself as you are, and you share those things, there's maybe less of that, like seeking or feeling like I need to be approved, I need to be like seen certain way, but it's shared from the space of like, this is who I am. I feel vulnerable. I feel
Yeah.
like sharing this, and there's less of that expectation or focusing on the response as much, or giving it more power.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing in that I think about with vulnerability is the poet David White says that vulnerability isn't a choice. And you were mentioning that like for those of us who are achievers, it's like I have no control when I'm vulnerable. And I think our spiritual traditions, and David White puts it really well, is vulnerability isn't a choice, it's our ever present reality. Like we
Mm,
just, as humans, we are vulnerable. We never know when tragedy is going to strike, and when death or suffering are going to appear, and so that control is like such a well intentioned way of trying to protect ourselves from that suffering. um, but what I found working with people and I've, part of my work actually has been sitting with people in profound moments of grief, is that when we're more in touch with the grief and the loss, we're also more in touch with gratitude, and vice versa. When we're attuned to true gratitude of like, wow, it's an absolute privilege to be alive right now and breathing and having this conversation with you. It's also a way of being able to better and more deeply connect to the suffering and in those around us too. And so those are two sides of the same coin. Um, but really, they stem from our fundamental vulnerability in that we don't have control in so much of our lives. And giving up control is not necessarily always the same thing as giving up agency. And I think
yeah.
uh, folks often think like, well, I have to always be in control of things, or they're like, I'm in control of nothing. And to recognize like there's so much that just comes and goes, that's different than the agency that we've been talking about of this true self, that gets to have freedom and choice um, and move in a particular direction. Uh, but again, like the outcomes, we have no control over.
Yeah. All right, Benjamin, before I ask you the last question, where can people connect with you, learn about you and what you do?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, folks can follow me on my website at innerlifeofsport.com. But I also send a weekly newsletter, and a resource guide that has tools from performance science and sports psychology, but also our contemplative traditions, and it's full of quotes and poems and things to read. And that comes out on Wednesdays, and it's called A Life Well Lived. And so folks can sign up for that on my website. I look at past issues as well, and those are some of the great ways to connect with me.
All right, we'll put it in show notes as well. So, last question, what is the impossible you're chasing now?
The impossible I'm chasing now is building sustainable communities where we can find collective healing, both on the individual level and on the social and political level, but also spaces where folks can express themselves without obstacles to or obstructions from that deepest, truest self, so that they can live, perform, and be in relationship with one another from an unobstructed self-expression. So what that looks like takes many different forms, but that's the impossible and the purpose that I'm living right now.
That's beautiful. Well, Benjamin, thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation. We covered a lot of ground.
That we did, yes.
And everybody, thank you for listening if you got to this far, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be with you.